Hello everyone, welcome back to ZW3D sketch training, and today we'll start the section 3. It's about the high-level applications of 2D sketch. First, I will introduce the default setting. In ZW3D sketch level, we can customize the color of the point, line, dimension, text, and constraint. And this can be found from the Tool ribbon tab. So, let me show you in ZW3D. So as you can see under the Tool ribbon tab, we can find the attributes here. So you can change the color of the point and style of the point and other detail. Also for the line, you can also change the style, width, color, and also for the dimensions, we can change the decimals. And apart from that, for text, you can change the size, the width, the height, and other details for the text attribute. And also for the constraint color, you can change it. For example, we have predefined the overdefined color into red and the well-defined color into blue. Okay, let's continue. In the second part, I will introduce the trace profile. So what is the trace profile? Actually, the trace profile is draw the contour of the trajectory along the current connect sketch geometry to pave the way for the subsequent solid modeling. And for example, for this case, we draw the circle and a rectangle for it, but you will find the intersection outline. And at this time, the pattern is not closed, and therefore you cannot do other solid modeling commands such as the extrude. And with the trace profile, you can select the outline and the pattern will be closed. And after that, you can do the extrude for it. Okay, let me take an example to show you how to do that with the trace profile. So this is the example of the trace profile. As you can see, there is some intersections for this sketch. So we can use the trace profile, and which can be found from the sub-sketch menu. So we use the trace profile and select the outline. For this case, we select the outline first. Also for the circle. So actually for the internal figures, we have a lot of intersections, so we need to select the outline for it. And now we have finished the trace profile selecting, and let's move back to the modeling level. Because we use the trace profile, it is the closed ring, so we can use extrude command to execute the extrude command for it. That is the trace profile. When we use the traditional way, we need to use the trim functions to trim the intersection part, but normally, when we use the trim functions, the well-defined figures will turn into underdefined, so which means you need to add the constraint again. And this traditional way with the trimming functions will waste your time. So when you use the trace profile, it will help you increase the working efficiency. The next part I will introduce is the sketch reference. In ZW3D, we can find the reference tools under the sketch ribbon tab. And the sketch reference is divided into two types, and the first one is the projection and the second one is the intersections. For the projection type reference, we need to select the external object and project it onto the plane where the sketch is located. And after that, we can obtain the projection profile as sketch external reference. And for the projection type, we have four options for projection type, and the first one is the chain peak. So what is the chain peak? We can select the line and it will select the tangent segment automatically, as you can see. For this case, when we select this line, all the tangent will be selected automatically. And another option is chain between peak. So when we select two lines, the middle part of the two lines is selected automatically. As you can see, there is the end circle of the line. So when you move the mouse close to the end, it will highlight the nearest endpoint. So here are some tips for the chain between peaks. The line between the starting point and the end point will be selected when you use the chain between peak. And the green point will be displayed on the end, which close to the mouse. And for this case, as you can see, when you close to this point, the green point will be displayed to the closest end. Another option for projection is the loops. And for loops, it can be divided into several options, and we have all loops, boundary loops, shared, inner, outer, open boundary, no shared boundary, and silhouette. But normally, just 3 of them are most commonly used, and they are all inner and outer. For the all loops, so when you select a reference solid, and all the edges on the faces will be selected. And if you choose the inner ring, so only the inner ring of the selected face will be selected, as you can see here. And for the outer, if you use the outer loops, so only the outside profile will be selected. And apart from the projection, ZW3D also provides an intersection reference. The intersection reference is normally used to find the intersection point or line of the selected external object with the sketch plane, and it is used as the sketch reference. As you can see from this page, the intersection point of the selected external object and the sketch plane will be highlighted, and after that you can use the intersection point to create other objects such as the arc. Also, for the intersection tool, it also has the single selection and chain pick, and the usage is similar to the usage of the corresponding command in the projection. For the intersection, this command is used more frequently in the surface type modeling. For the sketch reference, we also have some other settings such as the external reference managers. And this one is normally used to modify and delete the external reference. So as you can see, this is the command window for the reference manager. And another one is the unlink. This tool is normally used to remove the association relationship between the sketch reference and external object. When you unlink the reference, it can convert it into the sketch entities geometries and become editable. But if you don't unlink the reference, the dimensions cannot be modified because it is in the reference status. Okay, let's move to the ZW3D to show you some example. Let's move to the sketch level. So first, we select this datum as the sketch plane. As I mentioned, you can find the reference under the sketch ribbon tab. And we provide the projection type and intersection type. And let me take the chain pick as example to show you the reference command. So the first is the chain pick. As I mentioned, when we select a line, and after that, the tangent segment will be selected automatically and create the reference line. And if you use the chain between pick, and after that we select two lines, and the middle part of the two lines will be selected automatically. And if you want to select the other part, just select all the line you needed, and after that, all the line between the selected line will be highlighted automatically and create the reference line. Okay, let's introduce another option. It is the loop. So as I mentioned, the commonly used loop is the all, inner and outer. So when you select the all loops and select the entity, and all the edges will be highlighted and create a reference line automatically. But if you insert the If you choose the outer, only the outside profile will be created for the reference line. And if you select the inner, only the inner ring of the selected face will be used to create the reference feature. Alright, let's continue. Another part of the reference tools, which is also very important, is the external reference managers. And with the managers, you can select all the created reference curve, and when you select each of the curve, it will be highlighted in the sketch plan, and you can choose to delete the unneeded one. So this is what the reference manager normally used for. And another command of the reference is the unlink reference. With the original reference line, you cannot do any modifications on it. But if you unlink it, so you can change the positions or the dimensions of each of the reference line. Another very useful high-level applications is the sketch block. So what is a sketch block? It is to store the pattern in the ZW3D, and it can be used in other drawings. When you create the sketch block in the sketch level, the next time when you want to reuse it in other drawings, you can just find it from our sketch block library. Let me show you how to create a sketch block in ZW3D. Okay, I will create a slot and make it into block. Let me change the radius to 10 millimeters and create a slot. And after that, we can find the make block command under the subsketch of the sketch ribbon tab. So we can make it into block. First, let me select all the entities and define the name for it. And for this case, I will make it into the flexible sketch, and I will introduce the more details in the next slide. We finished the block making. So when you want to reuse it, you can find it under the insert block. So this one is the block which I just created. As I just demonstrated in the ZW3D, I have just created a flexible block. So what's the difference between the flexible and the rigid block? So what is the flexible block? When we insert block to other sketch, and the shape of the block will change as the related constraint changes. As you can see in these pictures, the gray one is a flexible block. So when we drag other entities, the size of the block will be changed. For this case, when we move the positions of the red rigid block, the dimension of the flexible will be changed. But for the rigid block, so after we insert the rigid block combined with other entities, the shape of the block cannot be changed. And some tips for the flexible block. The relative dimensions of the flexible block cannot be defined. Otherwise, the corresponding dimensions can't be changed. Alright, let's move to ZW3D to show you an example. As I mentioned, we have created the block, the sketch block, in the last example. So in this case, we can insert it. And let me add some constraint for it. And for this case, I will use the point coincidence. And because it is the flexible block, so when we move the red one, and you can see the dimensions of the flexible block can be changed. When we right-click the flexible block, we can make it into rigid. So when we change it into the rigid block and rotate the red part, so you can see the dimensions will not be changed of the rigid block. So that is the difference between the rigid block and the flexible block. I've just finished the introductions for the sketch block. So next I will introduce is the ready sketch. So what is the ready sketch? The ready sketch can be reused in other drawings. If you want to make the sketch reference into the ready sketch, you need to create a rigid block before we creating a ready sketch, and then select the current rigid block and click the right mouse button to create a rigid block. Apart from a customized ready sketch, ZW3D also provides a variety of the pre-made sketch built in ZW3D, which means you can use it while designing work. Because I have changed this part to the rigid block, so you can right-click it and save it to ready sketch. And as I mentioned, in ZW3D we provide a lot of predefined ready sketch, so which means you can use it in your design. The next part I will introduce is another very convenient tool. We call it the modify value in batch. This command also can be found under the sketch ribbon tab. So what is the modify value in batch? Normally, when we finish the sketch creations, after that we need to change the dimensions. But sometimes when we change dimensions, the shape of the figures will be changed. But with the modify value in batch, we can change the dimensions together. So we can select the multiple dimensions to modify it uniformly in the list. It will help us to realize more efficient sketch editing. At the same time, as I mentioned, it will avoid the distortions or deformations graphic caused by the modifying the single dimensions. So let me take an example to show you how to use it. Here is the example. We can find the dimension editors. We also call it modify value in batch under the sketch ribbon tab. And for this case, I select 3 different dimensions into the list, and we can change it just in the dimension editor window. For example, let me change this radius to 15. So when you tick the regenerate, the site will show the preview. Let me change the angle to 50, the length to 80, and as you can see, it's very convenient to change the dimensions by using the dimension editor. And besides, we have the increment options. For example, if I change the increment to 1 millimeters, the size will be changed together. So therefore, you don't need to worry about the distortions. And also, for log ratios, when you change the size, other related dimensions will be changed by proportions. It will help you to keep the shape of the figure. So, this is the modified dimension in batch function. In the last part of these sections, I will introduce the parametric sketch. So how to define the parametric sketch? We can define the variables in the equation manager. With the equation managers, we can manage the variables and the expression. And all the variables can be used in the sketch or the modeling level. Let's look at these pictures. We can change the value to the variables by clicking this icon and select the variables which we predefined in the equation manager. When we use the variables in the sketch, you can change it under the expression managers. You can find the corresponding parameters and change them in the managers on the left hand. So the difference between the assigned and unassigned value with the variables, and you can find there is a symbol in front of the assigned number. For example, this value is using the variables, but this one is the fixed value. Next, I will take an example, sketch example, which we created in the previous sections, and assign the parameters in the individual dimension value for the parametric sketch design. So when you need to change the corresponding dimension later, you don't need to enter the sketch. The only things you need to do is change the value in the history managers and to change the corresponding dimensions to the target value. We can find the equation managers under the tool ribbon tab. Let me create some variables for this case. And the first one is the length. And then let me predefine the value to 77. And another one is the angle. For this case, the angle default value will be set to 45 degrees, and we need to change the type of it to change it to angle. And also another one is the radius. Radius of the slot. And this one, the default setting is the 14 millimeter. Okay, let's move to the sketch level. And as you can see, all this value is the fixed value, and we haven't used the variables for it. So let me apply the parametric design for it. So first, let me change this value to the radius, and you can see you can find the symbol in front of the value. And for this one, let me change it to the radius, the angle, and also this one, change it to length. So these three dimensions are using the variables, and you can find the symbol in front of the value. Okay, we have applied the variables for this sketch. So if you want to change the size, you only need to find the expression managers under the expression managers on the left hand. And if you want to change the length to 80, degree to 50, and the radius to 15 millimeters, and after that, click the region. You can see the dimensions and the shape will be changed. And let me show you one more again. Change dimensions to 60 degrees. You can see the shape will be changed after we change the value of the variables from the expression manager. Okay, that's all for the section 3 of the sketch training. And in the next sections, I will show you how to create a 3D sketch in ZW3D. Thank you for your listening, and see you next time.